Hello and welcome to Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is April 18th, 2025, and we are looking at Bitcoin today, of course, as always to start, as it does run these crypto markets. And we're looking at the weekly. We're going to start with the weekly, kind of define the criteria for what we would want to see if it were to happen over the weekend, and kind of what would happen if Bitcoin closes here below the lower first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands as well. So we'll start out here on the weekly, and I want to point out something, excuse me, that I think I've pointed out before, but there's a bit of a fib extension from this last leg up to last year's consolidation, kind of right around where this low is coming in near the high side of the consolidation from last year, the consolidation highs at least. And the first big high, that higher high than the previous high, was our break of the $69,000 all-time high. This is not the way that you're going to see like an Elliott wave guy do this, but if I were to pull a fib extension here and to that low at $49,000 from the higher low on the monthly at around $24,900, $25,000, and kind of pull this over, I want you to note where on the trend, not a fib extension. I'm sorry. This is a Fibonacci trend, so it's a trend fib. And in this case, it's under your trend-based fib extensions. So it is an extension tool, but in this case, I do find it interesting that we have confluence with the 382 and 50% of the extension here. So I did want to kind of point that out. And, does it mean too much? Not really. 702s are pretty popular and pretty accurate on extensions. Above a 702, we're probably going to be hitting that 786 to 888 up there. But I do find it interesting that the 382 is kind of right where the low is, right around 74.5, and Bitcoin has yet to close above around $85,000 by the 50% of the extension here. In addition, if we were to pull that consolidation with a regular fib retracement tool on the extension here, we can see that we're sitting on the 1272 extension on a close open basis. And that is interesting. We hit and rejected the 1618 up here, swung around that upper second standard deviation, even with a slight close on the monthly to the 1888 there. So, it is something to be aware of because we do have confluences, but it doesn't really mean much. It's just confluence right now. And we want to kind of focus on this weekly because Bitcoin has not yet recovered on a close above the lower first, not upper first is up here at 100,000. But the lower first here is at right around 84.6, 84.7, depending on if price is trading in and around it. It's just below it right now. And that does mean if it closes in here anywhere close to here, we're going to see the basis band tick down again. We might get a close open that is above the lower first, meaning that if price closes here, we may see the lower first slide under price here. And if that were to happen, then, from a volatility standpoint, we can take a look at the local range where the lower first on the weekly is likely going to be right around, if it were to close right here or close above, we can kind of look at Bitcoin playing in that range of volatility. We're going to see the basis band likely tick down 92 and below. And that means that anywhere from 85 to 92 would kind of be fair game. That just so happens to be the confluence that we're going to look at here on the daily for the overhead resistance zone. And that is like the high side of that overhead resistance between 88.7 and 92K that I've been pointing out. If we do see Bitcoin fall and close below this lower first, though, we're still playing with and flirting with that lower second, which is likely going to move down. Right now, it's at the 76.5 or so, right here by this low. right around that lower second. We're likely going to see it start to slide down towards the actual low here at 74.5, 74, 420, 69. Nice. And we have a few different things going on here for the weekly and 5-day are going to be closing at the same time. I like to use the 5-day as a leading indicator, but because they're closing at the same time, we can take a look at the 5-day, which is going to continue with its expansion down no matter where Bitcoin closes. But Bitcoin is, it did get a close open on this last 5-day period above the lower first, giving the bias that the lower first is a pivot there at 87,800, 83, I'm sorry, 82,800, 87,800, 82,800 to $83,000. Which means that if Bitcoin puts in a high here or fails to push up any further, then it's probably going to slide down and try to test the lows around the lower second. We are likely going to see that lower second slide in below on this next closure this Sunday, below the actual low into the high side of this range, somewhere around the $73,000 to $74,000, even 72 is kind of fair game there. This is showing signs that it wants to mean revert. We're kind of already seeing that. Price is holding kind of sideways. It is getting lower lows, but kind of holding sideways around this lower first. And the basis coming down to it is a form of mean reversion. But, it gives the bulls a chance if they want to break above the $88,800, $89,000 low. So, break the actual downtrend here while recovering the last higher low on the 5-day and weekly. That would put things probably right in and around the basis band. And that's still, it's caution, but a trend break's a trend break. So then we could still look at this low, if this low holds, as a potential area to look for higher low, equal low structure. Otherwise, it's a deviation and a failure. Right now, as it stands, it's just a downtrend. Now, for the 5-day, we do have a momentum shift. And the pivot's going to be 81,621. So this is a counter trend signal. And what we need to see is a low set. Well, where would a low be set? For the 5-day, technically on a close, the swing low is already set. And it was set when we got the bull candle here in the last 5-day session. The swing low at 74, 420, 69 was set. But to close that low, we need to see closes at minimum above $87,000, but preferably you want above that $88,800, $89,000, right? That's kind of where things stand right now. That would be a trend break, set the low, got the counter trend signal on momentum, and then then you can start possibly we can evaluate for obviously this last low being an area of interest for potential higher low, equal low structure. But we can't really call that right now. The back half of this month that we have now entered is that was pause right there. Jeez, no diddy. But the back half of the month, we might start to get some good indications on where price wants to go. April into May. May into June, we'll see kind of, we're going to get a lot of economic numbers that are going to really paint the picture of where we are with these mixed signals that we've been getting regarding inflation and deflation. Some sectors getting inflation, some sectors getting a lot of deflation for the U.S. economy here with energy prices coming down drastically. We'll see how the tariffs kind of, I'm looking to, PPI, part of ISM, but PPI is something that I want to keep a close eye on because of the tariff stuff. That's going to be around May 13th, 14th timeframe, I believe. So, we're definitely going to get some early indications on our charts, though, before then in terms of what the possible areas of interest are to the upside and downside. So I do think that it's worth paying attention, even though things have been quiet fairly recently this week in terms of chart movements. The weekly already has an initial cross. So any closes above right around $79.5 to $80,000 will get a full cross counter trend signal on the weekly, as this is a downtrend. Again, same criteria on the weekly as the 5-day. Closes above as essentially $89,000, 88,800 here on the last lower high. You'll see the low being set on closes above 86 for the weekly, but like I said, on the 5-day it needs to be 87, and then there's the swings at 89, 89 is really what needs to break. We need to see the swing downtrend broken on a closing basis. So you could just call it 89. That would be a nice reclaim, break the downtrend, set a low across some major time frames here, and then maybe try to push higher, and then we can evaluate for higher low, equal low structure. We're not really seeing too much. If we set a low here, we would get a closing low specifically. We would get another drive of hidden bullish divergence. There's a lot of people like front running that already. And I don't, even if this is going to be the area where we find the bottom for this particular move, we still need to see structure built, like a higher high and then higher low structure, whether it's on a swing or a close. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity, and it's worth sitting back and evaluating that. Doesn't mean you can't trade lower term timeframes or stuff like that, but I think it's worth paying attention to if and when it does set the low, because that's going to be a trend break and a reclaim. And then we await, lower term time frame confirmation of that and a higher low, equal low structure that follows through with the weekly. So, we'll kind of gauge where that happens, or if this is just going to be continuation to test the prior range highs over here. Let's go ahead and go to the daily, and we'll kind of skate through momentum pivots for the intermediate time frames up to the 5-day, as we did take a look at the 5-day already. I guess I'll revisit and just kind of go through them all, but let's go ahead and turn on the local support and resistance areas of interest or zones of interest. Again, $85,000 is the lower term time frame pivot. That's right where the upper first standard deviation on the daily is. That as a reminder, prior range, big ass weekly zone of interest down here between 65, which is the monthly basis band, otherwise known as the 20 simple, and also the previous high, the first real big macro high in 2021 at 65. And then of course we had 69 after some Wyckoff reaccumulation, pretty much bog standard Wyckoff reaccumulation, by the way. But the first post expansion out of that range, the first bearish candle, is this $85,000 candle. This is a very important candle for structure. The low has been a lower term time frame pivot. You can see the close open there is where we set a higher low on the 1618. Now this fib extension, the 1618 or 16.8%, is the $69,000 to $15,500 fib pull. And this is the extensions from that at the 1.168 at 88,700. We saw the first bearish candle pause right there. Low being set at 85. This is also where we saw a big higher low come in right on it. And then we sat on the top side on a closing basis at $92,000. And we see that it wasn't until we got an actual close in here. We did wick in a few times, right? But as we kind of go along here, it wasn't until we actually saw a close in here that we got the test below on the very next daily candle that also closed below that that higher low right off the 1618, put in the low at 78, ran right back to, of course, over the weekend, and helped by a post by President Trump. But I'll be honest with you, it was looking as though it was going to try to bounce back up from mean reversion anyway. I think that in that case, it did exacerbate the move. It might have been a shallower move, but it came right back up and retested the consolidation prior to breakdown, right? And then we got the true test of the support resistance zone as resistance here after a nice swing higher low. And closing higher low right into resistance for a lower high, lower low structure down to the 76.5. So we had 78, 76.5, came back up, retested the resistance there. And again, remember, we put a higher low in here on the weekly at that 89, just shy of the 1618. And then we basically tested that and then dumped out to new lows, front running the big ass weekly zone of interest down there. And essentially 65 to, you can call it 74, 73, 35 here on spot price. Now the daily's pretty clear, right around this 85. This is going to be our pivot, but we need to see closes above basically 86.5 to go test, 87 to that 89 up here. Essentially a reclaim of that's going to look really good, especially if we get follow through for the weekly. Any closes above the close open up here at that 87.5 would put it up around the upper second standard deviation. So understand that we could see a pivot there or a swing up in, but if we see closes, then we're gonna, if we haven't already tested up into the red zone up here, then we're very highly likely going to see a test. And then if we get close over close, we'll get expansion into overhead resistance. Same goes for the downside. If we lose the basis, which is essentially going to be codifying this area and swing low structure around $83,000 as kind of a breakdown. Granted, it's at 82,754, but it looks like it does want to creep up if price doesn't come at it right away with this Saturday session that's now open. Then I'd be looking down to around 80 to 78. So you can call that 78 to 80s, the zone of interest that you want to see hold. Anywhere below there is expansion into the lows again. Bitcoin could save itself around the 76 and a half, 75 to 76 and a half area. Otherwise, I'd be looking for any closes below the lower second to run down to 75 to 76, possibly in to test this low and lower. So something to be aware of on the daily there. We don't have we don't have too much in the way of divergences for this particular move up, which is trendless. The trend is your friend until the end of the trend. When the trend is unclear, everyone's in fear, and that's kind of where everybody's at right now. Everybody's like just waiting, and there are some people that are very fearful that price is going to fall. And in this case, it's just a waiting game, right? It's either going to break into the overhead resistance and test it, or it's going to break down into the downside supports and test. The momentum on the stochastic momentum indicator here is pivoted at right around 83,000. It's 82,900 essentially. So if we start seeing a close below 83, then this is likely going to turn. If we just see price go sideways, this is likely going to turn. Now, that doesn't mean it can't bullish or reset, it can't save itself and all that stuff, but it's a weekend, it's a holiday, who knows what's going to happen. So just be aware that the pivot is right around where we would set a low. So $83,000 is what I'm going to be watching. Anywhere below there, 78 to 80. If 78 starts to get dropped, I'm looking for the lows to get ran somewhere around the lows, even if it's just on a swing basis. Anywhere below the lows, we're going in for that big retest. And we'll kind of go through some of the momentum pivots. 2-day, it's going to be up on close above 78.4. 3 days going to be up on close above 76.7 basically. 4-day, it's going to be up on closes above 79.5. We start shooting towards 80 and closing around there. We're probably going to see that get kind of get destroyed, that signal, counter trend signal. 5 days, 81,600 or so. And then we've got the weekly pivoted at right around 79.5. So, again, to simplify it, we drop 83, be very aware that, it can save itself around the 82s, around the basis. But realistically, I'd be looking for 78 to 80. And I'd want to see that hold up if I'm bullish, or at least I'm interested around the lows, and I will be taking a look for possible trade setups there on the way down, and on the way for a possible area of interest for longs. But if it starts to drop it, then we're probably looking at the lows and lower, going in for that big ass weekly zone of interest retest. And then of course, if we start to see things closing back above, 86 and a half, you can raise that to around the 87 and a half, and then possibly a retest of 89 to 92. That would look pretty good, especially if it comes in towards the weekend. Otherwise, we're looking at next week and Monday for a follow-up on what my thoughts are on price action right now. Not too much really to not much happening here. This is definitely pause market, as one David Gokhshtein has termed it. At least the past 6 days or so, or 7 days here. I just hope we don't end up in a situation where we're just going sideways forever like we did basically for most of February. That would just suck, and would probably turn bearish, to be quite honest. Doesn't mean it would necessarily do that. We just track it if it keeps going just sideways, but be very aware that it could potentially turn bearish. Let's go ahead and take a look at ETH. I have ETH actually on a 4 hour here, and the reason why is because we have massive compression on ETH. It's 4 hour. It is sideways. It is looking for a potential expansion in to test its recent low side structures around 15 and a half or 1550 to the downside. If we start to see it breaking above 1600, then it could potentially start to expand back to its highs here, 1645 to 1691, 1700 area. That would be pretty interesting. Otherwise, if we do see 1550 breakdown, we're looking for the lows somewhere around 1500 and lower, down to the actual lows here. 13, 1400 to 1350 or so. Probably the play there. So just be aware, this is compression. It will expand. So it's just a matter of gauging its expansion. It's pretty easy to do so. We start seeing close over close above 1610 here, then we're probably going to look to 1645 to that 1700 essentially. To the downside, you start seeing it close below like 1570. We're probably testing the lows around 1550, and anywhere below there we're going to get expansion down to retest 1500 into the 1400 area, and endangering that low side structure. So that's kind of the look for Ethereum as it stands right now. Let's just go ahead and we're going to group this and label it temp. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. Let's go ahead and, is this what I wanted? I don't know if this is what I wanted for this. Well, we're gonna find out real quick here, huh? Yeah, so this ETH hit its 1618. What is this from? Give me just a second. We're gonna look at this real quick here. I think this is kind of important on the weekly. So the high side structure over here for the most recent highs, kind of this triple top setup with no closes above this high over here at essentially 4100 to the actual low, right? If we were to take this move down with the close, we did get a swing above to this low here before moving back up to swing and fail. We end up with Ethereum right on its right around its 1618, button up against its 1414. Whether or not you find that relevant, that's up to you. For the fib extensions to the downside here, it is a major area of interest. It's also, it is a big zone of interest for the weeklies in the longer term anyway. 1520 to that 1369, nice. Again, to set a low for Ethereum, you'll see a technical low set on closes above 1688. I need to see closes back above, $1,810 here. That would be a low set. Then we can look to the lower first, somewhere around 1900 and slightly above. Anywhere above there, we can look at the retest of the resistance area, this big zone that was holding up quite well for Ethereum between 2100 and 2300. And, I'm bearish below that in general, even on nice run-ups. So, I mean, even though you could trade the counter trend on it, it's great and all, but we need to see structure built anyway. So it would look pretty good getting closes and recovering back above 2300. Then we can entertain further moves up to, 2500 and 2700 to 3K. But, it's right around the basis there for the weekly, but it doesn't really do too much. Counter trend signal might be incoming on closes above 1472 this weekend, so keep an eye on that. I believe the 5-day is already indicating that it could potentially do that above 1583, so it's a little bit higher, but it's right around where Ethereum is trading. And same thing, 1691 for the 5-day needs to get above that 1700 1800 area. Doesn't do much being below it. Right on the major support at 1520. Drop it. We're heading down, test the lows, possibly into that 1369, mid 1300 area if it swings under it on the daily. That 4-hour setup, though, is going to be your edge that I just described earlier. Daily is downtrend, consolidation in a downtrend, still biased to the downside. But, there is some momentum here, 1520 on its side. So, Ethereum, Solana are going to want to, pray for Bitcoin to hold up and try to work its way back to the upside. Solana's looking a little bit better here. Solana sitting on its 125 support here on the daily is good, but it's finding resistance at 136, 137, this swing high over here. And if it can break it, then we can entertain, you can kind of draw a through line from this low over here to kind of where all these highs are coming in, right around 137. We can start looking back to like 140 to 147, 150 area, locally. Above 150, we can start entertaining moves back to 169. Nice. But it's run out a lot of momentum, consolidating sideways in a bearish structure. Any closes below 130 will turn Stoke down. Any closes back below 125, we're going to test this higher low at 123.50 or so by the basis band. Anywhere below there, we're looking back to essentially 118 to 120, all the way down to the low side structure at 98 to 100 bucks. And that, of course, would endanger even this last big low down here at 95 bucks or so. For the weekly and 5-day on Solana, they're going to be closing at the same time. Looks like we might close the low if it closes anything like this. But again, I need to see closes back above basically that 137, start testing up towards that 147, 150, and break that downtrend. That would look really good. Otherwise, setting a low here would not mean really anything. Momentum is on the bulls' side, so they just got to set the low at 108.40 is going to be the momentum pivot. The weekly looking as though it could set it above 105. So, there is there's a better look on Solana than there is on Ethereum right now for the counter trend momentum setup. We could even see a signal being fired off on RSI. But again, none of this matters until we see a low set on a close. Swing lows are already set. Closing lows need to be set now for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and just about everything else. So that's what we're going to be monitoring over the weekend. What I'm going to be monitoring. Hopefully you will be monitoring that as well. And we will we'll follow up on Monday, see where things are and what potential setups present themselves. Other than that, I wish everybody a happy Good Friday. Have a happy Easter if you celebrate. And I will talk to you again. Have a great weekend. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out. Take care.